Hi, my name is Laura Keener. I am currently a student at Arkansas Tech University in the Library Media Specialist program. And today I am looking forward to sharing with you a presentation and a lesson plan that I have created about media literacy and the importance of evaluating sources. The learning objectives for this lesson align with the Arkansas Library Media Standards that are addressed, including evaluating information for accuracy, validity, social, cultural context, and appropriateness for the need, making critical choices about the information that students use, and of course, performing ongoing analysis of and reflection on the quality, usefulness, and accuracy of the resources that students are using. The learning goals are also listed here and the learning objectives of what I want students to be able to do at the end of this lesson. As this lesson would probably take a day and a half at least, maybe 2 days by the time students have reached completion, I am not going to model the lesson for you. Rather, I'm going to talk through how I would teach this lesson and how I would achieve these standards and these learning goals for students. So before students can understand media literacy, can understand media literacy and evaluating sources, we need to have a working definition of what media literacy is. Excuse me, as other things are popping up there. So I have taken this definition of media literacy from one of the texts in the sources that we used for the course. I've just taken media literacy and added it to our slides here. So what media is first, knowing that media is any communication that is used to distribute information, outlet or data, any communication outlet. It could include mass media and social media. And then literacy, obviously, is the ability to think critically and make informed choices when creating, consuming, and engaging with information and various forms of communication. This definition of literacy I actually took from the OER Commons source that I'm using, and I will credit that at the end of this presentation. So whenever we put together our definition of media and our definition of literacy, we come up with media literacy is the ability to think critically and make informed choices. That is our literacy definition when creating, consuming, or otherwise engaging with media messages which are conveyed via various forms of communication. Then I have a few slides, again, taken from the OER Commons lesson plan that I found that I'll talk about at the end of the presentation that really looks more in depth at what creating is, what consuming media is, and how we can otherwise engage in media, just probably in ways that students don't even realize that they do. Also, we want to define what media messages are, that media are messages that anyone can access. So an email from me to a coworker is not a form of media, but a newsletter that anybody could subscribe to is a media message. Also, any kind of posts that we make, this can be digital, but it can also be non-digital. Then I have a few examples of media being digital messaging, but then also just reminding students of what our non-digital messaging looks like. We will continue on with the importance of thinking about media literacy. For me, what I think is probably most important is the ability that students can think critically about media. This is where we want to ask those questions about what is being communicated. What do other reliable sources say about this information as well? How accurate is it? So I have a few more questions that students can ask whenever we're thinking critically about mass media. Also to make those real world informed choices, because these have real world consequences that I want students to be able to think about as we're thinking about evaluating our sources and media literacy. Media literacy is so important for students because it allows all of us users to protect ourselves from the negative impacts that some media can have by questioning its intent. So here we'll move on to those negative impacts and what I want to really encourage students to protect themselves from. And as before, whenever we looked at what it means to create, consume, and otherwise engage. Down here, we'll follow a similar format, hopefully making it easier for students to follow a fake news, media bias, and mental health concerns. So fake news is any kind of media that's meant to mislead and influence users. Media bias, which I don't think students often think about, but I would like them to, are the biased opinions from news distributors and journalists when selecting the stories and events that get broadcast, not just which ones get broadcast, but how they are covered. And then obviously we know as educators about mental health concerns that are caused by online bullying harassment. That's one's very obvious, but maybe one that's not as obvious is the influencers who often misrepresent reality. And not just influencers do that, but everyday users of social media do misrepresent reality, which can cause mental health concerns for many users. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that and kind of understand how we can be more critical users of media as a result of being aware of those. So some things that we can do to be kind of more critical thinkers of media is by employing media literacy skills. And that is learning about algorithmic literacy, which I thought was a very interesting point from one of the articles that we read, questioning the media that we consume, and analyzing and evaluating the media content. And just as we have before in our two previous sections, we will break each of these down in a little bit more detail. Learning that obviously algorithmic theory is when algorithms create specific media to the user based on their previous activities and habits. So you may not be receiving full information available about a topic because a platform is using algorithms to show you information that the platform knows you're interested in. So it would give you a more biased perspective of that information rather than a more full picture of it. So algorithmic literacy is very important to know, being able to think critically about our algorithms. Also questioning the media that we consume. What's the purpose? Who is it geared towards? Could it be interpreted differently by different audiences? How so? Does it come from a reliable source? Has anything been left out? And to continue that analyzing and evaluating media content, I have a resource that I've used in my classes before. And I asked the students, and they think it's kind of funny, well, is this source just crap? And at first they kind of look at me and they're like, did she really just say that? But we use it as a mnemonic device to help us evaluate sources. We want to check the source's currency, its relevance, its authority, accuracy, and purpose. And looking at the first letters of all of those words, we come up with we ask ourselves, is this crap? Looking more closely at the crap test, currency would be the timeliness of the information, relevance would be the importance of the information for your needs. The authority is the source of the information. Accuracy, is it reliable? Is it truthful? Is it correct? And then purpose is, for what reason does it exist? So after I've talked about these with students, and obviously I would spend much more time talking about these with students, we could even give them a note sheet if they needed to for differentiation. Some students prefer to have notes so they can be moving around using some kinesthetic learning. Some students obviously learn better just by listening, some by seeing. So one way that we could differentiate this lesson so far is to give students a note sheet so they can take notes of those major points and refer back to them in our further practice, which we're going to see here. What I would like students to do as a result of learning this information is to practice evaluating media using the CRAP test. So they're going to apply the media literacy skills that we have talked about here. I have a link to that right here, but before we look at the link, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we could differentiate this activity that we are about to do. That we want to make sure that we complete this activity during class, as students will be analyzing a digital resource. We want to make sure they have access to that digital resource, that website. So we will complete this activity during class to ensure that all students have access. We don't want to limit access for any students who may not have Wi-Fi or internet access at home. Also, whenever we complete this, we could differentiate by either having students complete this on paper or completing it on the computer, whatever is more appropriate appropriate for your classroom environment. And then a method that I like to use with activities like this is the jigsaw method, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Just a quick review is that students are divided into small groups, which will be their home groups, and then each student will be will be assigned a division of the content in which they will become an expert. Then they'll leave their home groups to their expert groups, which I'll show you in just a minute, to learn about their assigned content more in depth. Differentiation occurs here because we are arranging the classroom to support collaboration and movement, again for those kinesthetic learners. If we needed to, as the teacher is monitoring this activity, the teacher could provide sentence stem supports for the students who might need help communicating their ideas. And also differentiation occurs as students are collaborating with both their expert groups first, and then they can choose how they can most effectively teach their content to their home group. So let's look at what this activity looks like. And here we have, whenever I click on that link, applying media literacy skills to evaluate media using the CRAP test. So here are the instructions, are pretty self-explanatory. We can review this with students. So the directions is the students will use this chart to evaluate the credibility of one of the internet sources that I have listed down here. I encourage you just to look at these because these are kind of some fun websites to get to look at and evaluate. So within each home group, one student would be assigned currency, one student would be assigned to evaluate relevance, one to evaluate authority, one to analyze accuracy, another student to analyze purpose, and then they would leave their home groups, go to their expert groups. So all the students who are assigned the purpose of this website would get together and answer these questions. Then once each expert group has answered all of the questions, they would come back together. Currency would report on what the currency group found in, again, the whatever method they find most appropriate and most interesting for their purposes, again, for differentiation. And then after discussing all of these 5 parts of the CRAP test, the students would evaluate the website for its credibility. Is the source credible? Why or why not? So I hope that this is this lesson in combination with both the slides and this activity are resources that you can use in your classroom to help your students as they are applying media literacy skills, learning why it's important, and then evaluating the media that they consume.